Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Women as Substance. My name is Mary Angela Baker, and I'm delighted to have you here with my two friends and colleagues, Nancy Rodriguez Weller, Annette Johnson. And we are delighted to have our guests and tell you all about it. So, my background is that I am an advocate for women's leadership. I absolutely find passion around helping women step into their leadership and help them find ways that they thrive.
Hello, hello. It's nice to be here again. And this is Annette Johnson. I am a certified leadership coach for women. I am an advocate against domestic violence, and my passion is working with women to help them realize their leadership potential.
Hello, my name is Nancy Rodriguez Weller, and I'm an assistant professor. I am a pharmacist and an advocate for older adults and a very passionate about global health.
So today we have an advocate, just like us, whose advocacy uses art to make a difference. And we're just delighted to welcome Ilyana Kadushin to our show today. Welcome, Ilyana. Come on in.
Ilyana,
Hey,
welcome.
Hey, Ilyana, how are you?
hello.
Me. Happy to
Thank
be
you.
here, Women
Thank
of
you.
Substance.
So we're just going to jump in with all the questions that we have for you. So the very first one, just tell us about yourself and who are you as an artist?
Well, I sometimes call myself a artist, performing artist, sometimes an artist educator, and sometimes I call myself a producer. It really depends on the project. I have different, and those titles are just for me to know how I'm connecting to a project and how to motivate myself. But yes, I've studied the arts and many different types of arts since I was a very young girl.
Great.
How did you become interested in the arts? Or I know from reading about you that you're passionate about music. How did you get started?
I think like most people, I watched and took in a lot of arts and culture, but then very clearly I felt myself very drawn being an extroverted and social child, that I loved story, I loved music, I loved the sort of animatedness of it. And so I very quickly participated in all sorts of different artistic endeavors and productions, and knew pretty quickly in high school that I wanted to dive even deeper, which led me to study at New York University Tisch School of the Arts in New York City, and just be surrounded by arts and culture. Music specifically, because there's story inherent in music. And I'm a storyteller and I'm a musician, and those are very much in marriage. They are inspired by each other. I feel like over the years, I've learned that I am truthful in a way in music that I am not in other areas, that I'm allowed to be more authentic
Hmm.
in my relationship with music as a performer, as a any way I wield music, I feel more truthful than almost anything else that I do. So that's probably why I've developed an even deeper relationship with music.
It sounds to me when we talk about being in the flow, it sounds like when you're engaged in the musical process that you become into the flow, and that's where that authenticity comes from.
Flow, 100%. I was also studying acting and theater. And while I love acting and theater and storytelling, and there is lots of truth and emotional truth in it, it was just a higher level. I was at a higher level in music. So it was some information I picked up about myself, where you can be connected and feel great about a lot of things, but then there's probably a couple of things in your life that you feel really in your own skin. You feel really meant to be, so I guess that's probably what I'd say about music.
That's interesting because one of the questions I have for you was how how does what you do, the work that you do, affect you personally?
Mm.
Um, aside from loving music, obviously you love music, you have a passion for music, but you do work that affects other people in a positive way. It helps them heal. It helps them to grow and to tap into their authenticity. So how does it affect you?
At a certain point, entertaining alone felt not enough. I have this relentless need to make a difference, to be an activist, to be an advocate. And I think what that did eventually is take what I did artistically and say, how can I make a difference? How can I affect change?
Mhm.
And that's probably what led me along my path from just being a performer. And I love singing for people and acting and all the things that I do and tell stories. And I love entertaining. I think fantasy and imagination and creativity for that sake is very important. But as I started to see the power that arts and creativity have for people to make them feel connected, to make them feel transformed from whatever they're struggling with, um, I just felt, I guess to answer your question, I felt more inspired and more deeply connected to myself as an artist when I knew the power that it had to go beyond entertainment.
And you have a story about how you actually had kind of an aha moment when you were, if you want to share that story with us.
Well, I was living in New York City at the time with my husband, and hurricane. I imagine you're talking about my Hurricane Sandy story, the storm.
Yes.
Um, so Hurricane Sandy hit the New York area and had knocked out a lot of power and especially some residences occupied by senior citizens in the far Rockaways of New York. And they were all put up in shelters across the tri-state area. And like many performing artists, my husband and I were asked to come in and perform music in the shelter to provide levity and joy. So my husband James and I went into that shelter and started playing music. And as I walked into the shelter, though, initially, and seeing hundreds and hundreds of cots with seniors lying in them, I just had this moment, first, just as a human being, about statistics in this country and how many seniors with the silver tsunami, we've all seen those statistics. And then just that we were somehow not valuing people to aging. We are a youth-centered culture. So not valuing aging, not valuing seniors. Very quickly, I saw the power that music had that day in the hurricane shelter to make people feel loved, to make them feel seen, to make them feel heard. And so that day I left the shelter and said, what can I do already as an artist to meet this need? Which is a process that I'm now very inspired to take other people through of what they do and then meeting a need. And that's something I'm very passionate about. So for me that day, it's what led me to create my nonprofit, which I founded in 2017 called Stories Love Music, and create that nonprofit to meet the needs of aging, of healthcare, of caregivers, using some of our oldest spiritual traditions in, as human beings of music, gathering around music and storytelling.
I just have to share a really, really quick story. A good friend of mine, she was a mentor. She was my boss at one time early in my career. She has early stages of dementia. Her daughter had to make a difficult decision to, put her in a place where she could be more safe. But she always loved music. So we have the link to the residence where she is, and they always have activities, people playing instruments. She's always dancing all over the place. Like it warms my heart to see her in that normal state, if you will. You know what I mean? It's like she still knows her love and her passion for music, and she's the one that's like dancing all over the place, always center camera, and I just love that she still has that connection.
It's so universal. And I never get tired of hearing, people have told me over the years I've been doing field work and research, working with music, with people. And people always come up with stories where, and it's not surprising. This is a path that's already been laid by neuroscientists and music therapists. We know the impact that music has, the lasting effect it has on people, even with a degenerative brain illness as dementia and Alzheimer's, that it is our connection to our soul and our spirit and the person we were before the diagnosis.
Yeah.
Now, you know what? I love that. I love that you're using that as a tool rather than going towards using medications. Have you maybe had some challenges with this project? Anything you would like to share?
Well, I think with anything that you're developing, and as any nonprofit especially, that you have to spend your first several years when you're doing something and creating something, especially around arts, which people love to relegate as an alternative. You have to prove yourself and you have to prove your mission. But I don't have any problem with that. As a woman, and this show, Women of Substance, I think a lot about that is confidence, and being relaxed and confident even when you have to convince. And I do a lot of convincing, which is around communication and convincing. A lot of times though, it's about trials and controlled trials and all of that. But I believe that my experience as an artist mixed with what I've seen and the people and the conversations that I have and hearing from people and hearing their stories and seeing the need is there's sort of a confluence of all that, and it helps me continue to articulate myself better and better, and be a better executive director to share the mission.
I say what you're doing is you're bringing together two parts, really. You're bringing the executive to get director part, which is the management piece, and you're bringing the artist piece. And for so many people, those two pieces never come together. So it's not just being able to say, I am passionate about music. I am passionate about the power it has through Stories Love Music. You have to say, okay, I'm passionate, and I have to also be a businesswoman.
Well, that's a very key point to me. I think in my success so far, if I were to actually say, a lot of people have pointed out to me, they say, Ilyana, actually what's rare in the way you work is that you do seem to be equal parts creative and equal parts business.
Yes.
That's very rare. We tend to lean in one direction. And I really gravitate to other women and to other people who also are able to think creatively and also think as a businesswoman, like you said, and be organized and have that administrative understanding. So whatever my endeavors are, whether it's Stories Love Music or the Know I Know podcast that I do, it's always very important to me to merge those sides of myself.
Well, you look like you're having a good time. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
And speaking of family, so you moved from New York City back to Maryland to be closer to your aging parents. And so how has your perspective changed about the work that you're doing with Stories Love Music now that you're closer and seeing your parents every day?
Yes, and it's fascinating because we made that shift even before COVID, the pandemic, which then suddenly put everybody on quarantine, with their families, and really changed people's perspectives on family. So I think it has really, I think because our mission at Stories Love Music is looking at aging and caregiving of aging, I think it is really helpful to look at our families and many people that have that struggle with when they're at a great distance from their parents as they age, how to stay connected, how to be there for them. What are their struggles, unique struggles, as they age, to have compassion, to try to look at the things that we do in our everyday life and how that affects how we age. So I would say it's really resonated and brought home what I was already working with. That we do need to value aging and value ourselves as we age. Women, I think have a challenging road with this in different ways that men do. What is seen as in men as, aged wisdom and, gravitas,
Right.
for a woman can sometimes be filtered through other things. And so while one of my main one of the things as an activist that I like to work on behalf of is women and girls, right? Women and girls of all ages, to support them. I've worked with middle school girls, high school girls, college age girls, and women, professional women of all ages. And I think it's just important to keep reinforcing that we are powerful, interesting, relevant, beautiful, at all ages, at all stages, and that we can't really reinforce that enough.
You know, it's interesting. I was with my daughters, and my oldest daughter said to me, she goes, "If you mention that you're 60 one more time, I'm going to scream." She goes, "Stop talking like you're a senior citizen." And, you know, for me, it's like I want to embrace and celebrate my age. I don't want, and there's nothing wrong with this, so I'm not judging. So for women who don't want to share their age, I respect that, I get that. But for me, and a part of me being whole and balanced and everything, I always wanted to be embrace my age and not be afraid to say I'm 60 or whatever the number is. But I noticed in that moment that my daughter is probably having some moments of reality that her mom is aging.
Yes.
And
That's a really big part of it. And,
yeah,
and then it's her own journey and path as a woman and what she's being fed from social media, from society, of what it means for where she's at her age or where you're at in your age and what it means. And, it's probably pretty complex, that reaction.
it is. And I don't know, it was just like, at first it was about me, the comment. And then I was like, wait a minute, I think she might be, dealing with this new phase, this new era that we're moving into as mother and daughter. And I certainly went through that with my mom. My mom is 87, and she lives in a long-term care facility. She is partially disabled, and so it's been a long journey,
Yeah.
accepting that reality.
Yeah, Nancy, I know that you also have an aging mother and you're the sandwich generation too, and younger children. How about you?
Well, so it's been challenging, and I want to give kudos to Ilyana for doing the stories
Yeah.
music, because this population is so they back in the 60s and 70s, we were so much into music, and it's a different kind of music. And that brings me to a question for you anyway, Ilyana. Do you see a difference in how music was back then to how it is now, especially as it you know is related to advocacy and political messages? Do you see a difference?
A great question. It's interesting because a lot of the work that we do in Stories Love Music is about music from different eras, right, in history, and looking at how it impacts and its relevancy for people at different ages in their life. And so it's interesting. I think one part of my answer to you is I think the work that we do is that reminding people that music has maybe moved into the background for them, that at one point in their journey, maybe as a teenager in their 20s, music took a front and center role into their development, into their day-to-day joy or processing of life as a human. And then at a certain point, it became wallpaper and background. So part of the work is to bring it to the foreground again. That's what we do with the caregivers. But to answer your question about music and its changing, I do think, James and I will talk about this a lot on our podcast, as well as music appreciation and music history is really important because music has changed and it's been, and I appreciate music of all genres from all different times because I think that there's things that are interesting about all of it. I started looking at my parents' record collection when I was growing up and, folk singers from the 60s, or my dad's jazz collection of, all these jazz pianists from the 60s or whatever. And that was my first introduction. What is this? How do I think about this? Do I like this? Ooh, I like this, or I don't really get that, or let me do my own exploration. And I do feel like music today, there's a lot of great music today, but I do feel like we moved into a commercialized packaging of music where you don't hear a lot of protest music, or let's say music that is reflecting society. You feel like you hear music artists that maybe felt like they had to package themselves and present their music in ways that felt very palatable to society so that they could sell it. And
That's a
You know,
good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and musicians at every time in history have faced that dilemma. How are we truthful to ourselves as musicians and create music that we believe in and that really says something, but will be received well? Some artists go, you know what, I'm making this music and I don't really care how it's received. Some music artists might have more pressure and feel like they have to make music that is a certain way, which is a lot of what pop music is compared to other genres of music.
So I'm curious, what kind of, well, I guess it's like two parts. What's the feedback that you've been getting from your participants? And is it what you had expected? Is this what you're hearing? Is this what you wanted to accomplish?
So in the first stage, I'll say the first chapter of Stories Love Music, where we were doing these in-person caregiver workshops with a mix of professional and family caregivers, we would do assessments of them going in and going out, how they felt, their state of mind going in and their state of mind going out, which was great information. And to answer your question, the majority were really heartening responses where the caregivers left feeling reinvigorated in their work and excited to try these new tools that we were giving them, and that they saw that they needed to attend to their own self-care with music and then could apply it in their caregiving. And that was all really positive. The statistics are clear, not to get heavy, but if we've got 40+ million caregivers in the United States, and the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving just put out a report on essentially a caregiver crisis, that I feel like the work that I'm doing and what neuroscientists and music therapists have been saying for a while is we can't relegate this anymore to be seen as an alternative last resort. It needs to be a daily practice so that we don't burn out or have the compassion fatigue when we really need it.
Yeah, and as someone who, as I said, my mom's in a long-term care facility, so I get to see all sides of the operation. And of my siblings, I'm the executive director of mom's affairs, right? So I'm always talking the business. I want to know what's happening with COVID. I want to hear about your protocols, etc. My youngest sister is the fun one. She makes mom laugh until she can't stop laughing anymore. But I share that because I see that in the staff too. There are the very business oriented, it's about procedures, protocols. And then there are people who will go in and hang out in my mom's room and do crossword puzzles with her, make her laugh, etc. And it's tough. It's a tough space to be in, whether you're a family member, a professional care giver. It's really a tough space.
I got a crash course in what it really takes for people to be caregivers. I have a great respect for caregivers, whether they're a nurse on a hospital unit, or they are a recreational director of a facility, or they're a home health aide, or they are a mother, father, sister, brother taking care of a family member. It's very easy for people to talk about things, but unless you have really observed what it takes. And I speak so highly about caregivers, not just because I've worked with them, but because I see what great big hearts they have and how generous they are, and how frustrated they are. And so I know, and how exhausted. So I feel that it just reinforces our mission. And it says to me, wow, it's so incredible that creativity. I remember sitting at a conference early on of music, a conference produced by the Institute for Music and Neurological Function. And all these panelists were neuroscientists and music therapists. And it was very early on. I was just there to take notes and get inspiration about these ideas that were cooking in my head. And they were just, blowing me away with talking about how many areas of the brain are lit up by music.
Yes.
How in Parkinson's, someone that cannot walk could dance when they had headphones put on them. Or a young child with autism would be more subdued if they were violent. And I have 100 stories for you working on Alzheimer's units. And they're stories that are illustrative stories that I love to share in my workshops or when I'm doing keynotes, because people say, oh, I got goosebumps. And I say, yes, you got goosebumps, because if there's ever a time where I would use the word miracle, it's moments that feel miraculous to me when you see the power of music to bring people to a different place.
So, Ilyana, we've heard a lot about loss in 2020. What have you gained in this last year that you'll be taking with you into 2021?
Let's see. Wow, so much. Like many people, it very quickly made it clear what was important, what was really of value and what was more frivolous. Resilience. That's a quality that I've always really admired in and really always tried to encourage in myself. And resilience is something that now you can look out into society and see these great examples of people coming up against great heartache and struggle and difficulty, and that there's something in human beings that wants to be resilient, even in the face of great struggle and heaviness and darkness. We want to overcome, we want to get lighter. And so I feel that it's just, to me, it's reinforced everything that I do, that I'm very grateful and proud to have work that are vehicles that allow me to be a part of transformation with people, whether it's my nonprofit, Stories Love Music, or my podcast, or when I teach at NYU, I teach public speaking, or I teach all sorts of different workshops, that I love connecting with people and causing shifts in their thinking, and just making them feel seen and heard, and just to illuminate what they've got going on already that is potential in them.
I can listen to you talk about this for like another hour, because the passion comes from your toes. Like, you are, you just talk about it in a way that you're just so excited and enthusiastic and sincere about what you do. And it's just refreshing for me to hear and see, especially from the personal experiences that I've had. And so I just say, I applaud you for this work. It's so important. It's so needed. And I hope that you get all of the resources and support and everything that you need to continue to do the work that you do, because it's so important.
Right.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much.
And as we wrap up, we usually like to also share with our audience other resources. So the Alzheimer's Association is located all across the United States, and there are usually local chapters that can help someone who's with caretaking. Or we also have the AARP. If you want information on caretaking, they have many resources. And actually, AARP sounds so scary and big. You can contact your state chapter, and they can help you out, and they can help put you in contact with other resources.
Also, Mary Angela, our website, storieslovemusic.com, if people after today want to learn more about Stories Love Music, but we also created a really nice resource page
Perfect.
on Stories Love Music about creative that have to do with different creative programs, even besides ours, that are out there.
Right. And then local senior centers. I always thought that a local senior center was just where people went to play bingo. And I've learned more and more that that's not right. They have many different resources. And then again, they have advocates. They have people that can help you with all sorts of different issues for both family members and for a senior citizen. So they're also a great resource.
This was good.
For all the work that you do
Yes.
on our behalf for older adults.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. We so appreciate you
so
being
much,
our guest
Ilyana.
today.
Oh, my pleasure. Women of substance. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.